Hello, Chloe from Petals and Vines here. I'm just going to do a tutorial on how to put a bouquet together for anyone wanting to know the techniques. That makes it a little bit easier. I have done all my floristry training, owned a florist shop in the past, and if I can pass a little bit of that along to anyone who needs some help, that'd be good. So I'll show you what I've got here. Now the sunflowers and the spinning gum are the only thing that is from my garden. The other stuff is just a bouquet I happened to have that my husband got for me and came in handy now that I want to do this video. So always work with odd numbers when you're making a bouquet, because that'll give it the round look. If you start working with even numbers, this bouquet will start looking square and out of place, except for your main flower, because your main focal flower, you'll have one in the center which you'll work out from, and then you'll use 3 after that. So our main focal flower are going to be the sunflowers. And you always work with the biggest one in the center. Now sunflowers are a little bit challenging in the fact that flower doesn't sit straight up. It's going to sit sideways, whichever way it was facing when you picked it. And then I've got secondary flowers, which are some white chrysanthemums. And we've got filler flower, some goldenrod, and then foliage. I've got some viburnum here, which come out of the bouquet, and then the gum. Now I'm just going to do just a small bouquet. I suppose it'll end up a decent size, but on the smaller side, and I'll explain that, and I'll explain a few different ways you can do it. Yeah, so we'll get our main flower. So this was the biggest one, and then we'll use 3 stems of foliage around that. For those who are wondering, a lot of people will just put them flat like that. If you haven't been taught any different or worked out any differently, you just put them flat against like that. But as a florist, you'll learn that putting your stems like across, spinning your stems as you go around, and they're all got to be facing the same way, will help hold it out so it's not all crammed in. Like if you put the stems straight, it's just going to pull all the tops really tightly together. Now for smaller bouquets, like, I shouldn't say bouquets, but posies, more things like posies, it's not going to matter as much. But when you start getting the bigger the bouquet, the more you want to do this, because otherwise, your flowers are just going to be all crammed in on top of each other, and they're not going to have space. You'll see I'll hold where it pivots, like where you do the crossover. That's where I'll hold it the whole time. So do that. Then this one, it's equally, also something else before I go any further, cleaned all the stems prior. So to clean the stems up to wherever you want. Like this one, you could even go back another set of leaves, just depends what you want it, what flowers you got to work with or whatever. Just put them evenly around, and like I said, some flowers are going to be a little bit challenging because they face a particular way. So yeah, just put them evenly around, crossing them over the same way the whole way around, just so it just looks like it's spinning around this. And just work them however you want. It's also, when you do the stems like this, it's really easy to just work them in where you want them. Now next I'll go with the filler. So you'll put that in between the gaps, and again cross your stems like that. And just go around, put one in that gap, and put one in this gap. Now sometimes it's going to move a bit. Sometimes, a lot of the time, I find once you've gotten your flowers in and foliage in around your main flower, you can pull him up a bit generally, just so the other stuff isn't taking him over. There we go, we've got that sorted. Then you can either go with more foliage. Just depends what look you want. This is just a basic. You could go more filler. You could go your secondary flowers, and I put them in wherever you see like the biggest like gaps. Really fill in the spots there. And again, we're going the same way every time we put a stem. We're crossing them over like that, not like that. Crossing them over like this. And again, you want these to sort of sit so that they are fairly evenly spaced. I mean, it's not going to be exact, and you don't necessarily want it to be exact, but yeah, you're going to place them. Then we'll go in with our other focal flowers. Across again, we'll go around. Across our stems. And this one can go in here. Now, in an ideal situation, this sunflower here will be facing straight up. But you can sort of see evenly placed, and they're not all really crammed in. Now I'm going to, sometimes you can go back if you think, oh, there's sort of like a gap there, and you can just feed your stems down. Just make sure that your stems are going to be coming out the same and sitting on the same angle as the rest. So I put a bit of gum in there because that'll fill that in nicely. Put some gum here at the front. Piece here. And your gum is sort of a finer foliage, so you know, if it's sitting a bit above the rest of everything else that's in there, that's not going to be a problem. There we go. So that there is, it's pretty well done. Like I said, in ideal world where sunflowers look straight up and down, that one would be there. So it's a bit of a hard one to be using as an example. I might just take him out, although normally you would use the biggest one. But I'm going to try one over here that is facing more up and down, so you can see a little bit more about what I'm talking about when it comes to having him in the center and working everything out around. There we go. So that's sort of how you want it to look. Yeah, and you see how the stems are now splayed out at the bottom like that, instead of being, if they were all, and you always hold it where you cross them over, because that gives the bouquet, look, I can move up further and it pulls the bouquet in. I can move down further and hold it, and it just gives the bouquet the air it needs. It just makes it, so yeah, it's not all crammed in on top of one another. Bottom, just cut your stems off, all sort of like, these are all over the place. The gum had fairly short stems. I just trimmed it off the bottom of the gum tree. So, but if you had a stem that short, you'd sort of cut it a bit below that shorter stem. Ideally, you'd like to cut them a decent length around there. Now, for tying off, I just use a piece of whatever you've got. Most people use rubber bands. I always tied them off with a piece of curling ribbon or whatever. But I'm going to show you how to tie it off, but I was a bit silly and I didn't bring anything to tie it off with, so I'm going to close this video off here, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how to tie it off and wrap it depending on the size, and then I'll show you a different style, how to do a different style bouquet. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so I just got a piece of my gardening twine. Now, you should be able to do this one-handed. I just bring this one around, go around twice, and when you come back to here, make sure you tie it off at that point that you're holding it on as well. When you come to here and put the end through twice, then it holds its own, holds itself when you pull it up tight, instead of having to try and keep it tight. when they're done like this, you should be able to sit them, you can't see, but sit it on the edge of a table and keep the weight on your whatever you're tying it off with, and it's not going to affect it. You got both hands to work with then. So we'll just tie that off. Do it tight enough to hold them in place, but don't do it so tight that you're going to squish the stems. Okay, so that's that tied off. Now you can sort of see how nice and airy it all is instead of being all really tight. Compact. I'll show you in a minute. I'll do one where I'll do them all straight and you'll be able to see the difference. Now with wrapping, this is just, I will be using brown paper wrapping on my flowers, but this is just some old stuff I've got. If you've got a small bouquet, so these are like a rectangle, start out as like a rectangle. Fold them so one point is just up above, like 2 points off to the side. Now in a medium sized bouquet, you should, let me just move the camera so you can hopefully see a little bit better. With this, if I'll just see if this one will be good enough for this size bouquet. So you'll just have to work that. So you sit it right, depending on where you want it to sit down in it, but just pull up that side, pull up this side. Ideally you would have your sticker with your business logo name on it here, and that's that wrapped. It's got all the points, a similar placing. If you had a bigger bouquet and that wasn't big enough to go around, you get this other sheet folded exactly the same way, and then sit the points across each other. So sit them across each other like that, and then it'll give you a lot more space, depending on the size to where you would sit the paper across each other as well. That makes a big difference, but that'll give you a lot more points and a lot more space to work with. Then you just use a lot more points, a lot more space, sticker there to secure it. If you want something that sits a bit more above the paper, so the paper isn't hiding the flowers, which I think a market bouquet, you will be more likely to be showing off the flowers and not, they wouldn't be hidden down in behind. Now if you're going to do that, I would cut this so it's a lot smaller, so the depth here wasn't as large. Therefore you could have it sitting, I'll just fold the bottom for this isn't how you would do it, but I'll fold the bottom just so I can see as an example what I'm talking about. Then if you sat it there and brought it around like that, then your flowers are a lot more out the top instead of being hidden down in behind. Yeah, just depending on what your flowers are, how you want them to, whether, yeah, you will do it like that or the other way. I'm going to undo this one. Put this up a bit more so you can see what I'm doing again. Okay, so I'm going to let this one, pull this one back apart into our different flower types, or our different foliage, secondary flowers, foliage, filler flower. Yeah, depending on what you're working with as well, to how much filler and greenery you need. I mean, some people prefer mixed in with greenery and fill a flower. Others just like a lot more flower, but of course then you've got to charge more, because the more focal flowers that are in it, You can have more than just those amount. Like the larger your bouquet is, the more focal flowers you could have in it. I've got a whole sunflowers, heaps of sunflowers, different colours and whatnot, but some of them have shorter stems. Now I'm going to show you a good way to use shorter stems as well. This is a bit more like a sheath style, so it's only one-sided. Like if you sat it against a wall, it'll have like a pretty much flat back, and then the front will be, you just look at the front. Now to do that, you work entirely different with that. You start out with your small, whereas with a round bouquet you start out with your biggest focal flower and then work out from that. With a sheath style, you're gonna start with your smallest flower up the top. Now I've got this sunflower here which is very closed still. He hasn't got a really long stem. Now there's two good things about a sheath style is it can use your shorter stems, because as you come down to the bottom you need shorter, the stems need to be shorter and shorter, or can be shorter and shorter. You're only going to cut them off to the length of the longest one anyway. And also it makes it easier to use the different flowers, like with the different, like this sunflower I put back before that, didn't really work in the bouquet as well. You can still use it in a bouquet, completely fine to use in a bouquet. I'm a perfectionist, so take that into consideration when you do yours. So this one would be perfect because it faces forward, and that's exactly what we want it to do in a sheath style bouquet. Now a sheath style bouquet can be as large or as small as you want as well. I'm just going to do with what I've got here, so I just add as I go, and it's not as important to have even numbers in a sheath because you're not working for a rounded look. So when I start out with this, then I'm going to put this one here. It's got a nice shape. See the shape of that? That's a really good, that A-line shape is really good to work within for a sheath. So I'll use that as the back. That can be a little bit higher. Then I'm going to sit the sunflower on top of that. Now always think about, flowers are going to move. There's no two ways about it. When you start a bouquet and think, oh yeah, that flower's sitting there, by the time you get to the end it might be sitting slightly different. That's okay. It's okay. Just work it with what it does, and even move them afterwards. It's easy enough to do. So I'm going to put some filler out to the side. We're going to try and keep our A-line shape because that's what a sheath will look like. As you work down to your bigger flowers, it's going to end up wider and wider and fuller at the bottom. Now I'll show you a bit more here in a minute. I just work some of this flowers in here. Now the next biggest, or like this next smallest flower, or let me see, I think I've got smaller ones in here, so we'll use them. They're quite, like really small, this one. Some, like these sunflowers are these are like just the shooting side stems, so they're quite small. They're not the size of a big sunflower. Now with a sheath, it is important that your focal, and even try to get your secondary flowers to be on all different levels. So don't ever sit them on the same level. They have to step down from each other. I would normally have a lot more filler flower for a sheath because you need a good background to work with, like a good shape background, and therefore you need, I'm going to step away for a minute. I've got some more status filler in this other bouquet over here which I'm going to get. Okay, so some status here. So I'm going to use a bit of this to my advantage here. This I would have already had it cleaned down, but I wasn't going to use it. But now I am. So we'll use some of that. That'll also bring in a different colour, but it's going to really help us with getting that proper shape. Let's get some more of this gum to get our size going out a bit. And with a sheath, you'll find you'll come back and add bits and pieces in here and there as you go. That's all fine. That's a good thing. That's really easy to do with a sheath, so don't worry about that. Sometimes you'll sit a flower there as well, and then you sit it, once you've got it there, you're like, no, that doesn't work there. So we just change it up a bit. Now, this is the next size. Pop it there. Depth as well, like depth, your shape, is all good to sort of watch how it's all working in with this. Now I'm going to put the sunflower to the side over here so that any side on view you're still going to see flowers. It's just the back that's going to be pretty much flat. There, that's a bit bulky for there. I've got a couple of different coloured sunflowers here with short stems, which I'll use in there, I think. Just get a couple of smaller pieces of this. We don't want it to be too bulky. You're just going to carry, when you're using lots of different colours, it's good to carry the colours through. So you don't want to just have like all one colour at the top and then go to another colour down the bottom. You want to be able to work the colours in with each other. Ideally, I would have a different type of focal flower here as well, which I'll be using in with this, but that's okay. I'm going to try and fit these ones. Like, got to keep in mind that you've got to try and keep them all at different heights. We don't want them to be sitting at the same height, so you end up looking like you've got flat bits happening. This are just a little bit bulky, not my ideal pick for a sheath style, but that's fine. We can work with it. It's just a little bit more difficult to work with. I've got another one here that's just a really not open. I'm going to just feed him in up here because I can see it needs something else up here. And we'll pop him in there. With a sheath style, you still do the crossover, but it's not as exaggerated, and it tends to what's that piece of gum here? You're moving your hand down anyway as you go. That's just how you have to do it with a sheath style. So a little bit different to a bouquet, but we still do try to do the crossover. Yeah, just not quite as exaggerated, like I said, as the other way. So sometimes feeding him in is better for the fact that it doesn't just, you can feed it down into like the filler flower instead of just squashing the filler flower, and you're not really getting any use out of the filler flower if you do that. Okay, I think we're just about getting enough in here for what the foliage and whatnot that I've got here. So I'm just going to put the last couple of finishing touches in here. Now I'm going to use this big one right down the bottom, and then we'll work everything else in with it. Okay, so we're going to pop him right down the bottom down there. Get a few of these shorter pieces of status, because why waste them when they can easily be used here. Right down the bottom, right around him, sort of making a cozy little bed for it, essentially, down the bottom here. I'll take that leaf off because that's just being a pest. Take a few more of these bottom limbs off here. I'll get it to sit correctly for me here. That'll be nice if it would do that. I'm going to put this, no, that's the same colour as the arm, so I'm going to put this one around this side down here, and I'm going to put this one right around this side and down here. Should be able to put these ones in here. As I said, these status haven't really been cleaned off properly, so I'm sort of working with something that I would normally have had cleaned off. Now you look like you're going astray. I'm going to pull you back into where you belong. Into there. Okay, I think that just about does it. It gives you a good idea anyway of what we are going for here. I would have preferred another piece of foliage to go in here just to finish this bottom piece off. But there, that's sort of what we're going for here. We've got our, what's the name, starter point up here, and then just like an A-line style down the front. Now you don't want to sit right, do you? But it's a bit hard to see the exact A-line shape there, but so that's the front. Ideally would have had other focal flowers to pop in between to just make it pop, but that's okay. This works. This gives you the general idea of what I'm talking about. Back sits against a wall, and all you see is the sides and the front. Okay, so that's something like this. I tend to, doesn't really need a wrap around it. If you did have put a wrap around it, you'd only make it really short. Make it really short. So I'll just stack. It's going to be a bit hard when we do more of the gathered style, and it will just sit really low around the bottom. Or you can get the ones where you do it and it has like a full open front and it has just up the back collected at the bottom. That will work as well. But yeah, that gives you the basic idea of that. Probably stick this in up here, which will make that look a bit fuller and nicer than what it currently does. Like I said, they move. Flowers will move, which is all fine, but sometimes they will move where you don't want them to. But they're fairly easy to manipulate them and move them back around where you want them. Okay, so that's, yeah, the sheath style. And I'll do a quick show you how. I'm just going to pull this one back apart. It's almost harder to get back apart than it is putting it together. Okay. I've got plenty of sunflowers on at the moment. Had a big storm last night. I thought would have wrecked a fair few of them, but these are only picked this morning and they're still very good. It did wreck some, it knocked some over, which is a bit sad, but I've got one here to show you as well. It's a different sunflower. While I'm here, I might as well show them off because it's one I've been waiting to come out the whole time, and it's taken the longest, of course, but it definitely was worth the wait. Now I'm going to show you something else while I'm here as well, to do with sunflowers. That is a little bit young to pick normally, or to pick them when they were like that. This here is fairly ideal, just starting to, like, it's still got a spread, like, yeah, just starting to open. That's pretty ideal. Now this one here is a different one. Camera doesn't really show it properly. It's really deep burgundy color anyway. It's a terrible shape though. Look, imagine trying to use that. If you're writing an arrangement or if you wired it up. Well, I don't intend on wiring anything because if you have to wire it, it's taken it. It's not natural, like in its natural state anymore. Sorry, my husband's looking after the daughter and they decided to come in. Okay, so I'm going to show you what it will look like if you don't cross the stems over. If you just put them straight on. I'm still going to do the same thing. I'm just not going to cross the stems, which is going to be hard because it goes against every... I'm going to have to keep stopping myself from doing it the other way. I'm just so used to doing it the other way. I'm going to swap you out again because you're a real pest to work with. I'm sorry. Flower. Also, something else, when you cross them over, it's much easier to add the stems in without moving your hand. Now, if you're doing it like this, I tend to have to spin the bouquet a lot, which when you're doing bigger bouquets means your flowers are moving around more and it's a lot harder to get the look you want, which then causes another problem. You end up with your things aren't evenly spaced out, and it just doesn't work the same as when you do it the other way. Now, some people like the compact look, but it looks much bigger to the customer if you do it crossed over, but there's a bit of air in between. You can see the flowers individually. They're all crammed up. It looks little and people don't see past that it's got the same amount of flowers in it. It's just looks littler to them. So even though you might know it's got more flowers in it, they can't see that, which then causes, it doesn't cause a problem, it's just people are less likely to pay what you're asking for that particular bunch of flowers if it looks smaller. So for example, someone next to you're at a market, someone next to your store had them so that they were all nice and fluffed out. You had them so they're all compact, same amount of flowers. They're going to buy the one that looks bigger. Another problem with doing them with their stems straight up and down is bigger your bouquet gets, you're pulling things in and you're going to break stems eventually, especially on certain flowers, of course, that the flowers aren't going to give or anything. It just Okay, that has a few more flowers. It has 3 extra filler flower stems compared to the other bouquet I did, and that is the difference. It's a bit hard to see on the camera actually, but it's heaps tinier. It's just all pulled in so tightly. The stems, see, aren't splayed out tiny bit, but not, probably because I did a couple, just out of habit. It just doesn't look the same, and the flowers will also get damaged a lot easier. So that's about it. I hope that is helpful for those who wanted to know what I meant by having the flowers stem straight up and down, crossing them over instead. Makes it much easier, makes for a much nicer finish. And yeah, so I hope it was helpful. I'm going to throw all these flowers together and put them in my vase to enjoy. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.